Hello and welcome. My name is Kira Heskey, and I'm the Senior Manager of the Learning Support Team at the University of Arizona Global Campus. I will be the host of this session, Are You Okay? Supporting students who struggle with mental illness. By joining us today, you acknowledging that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. Microphones will be muted for this presentation, but we encourage you to post your questions and comments in the chat. Also, we've enabled live transcription. If you'd like to use it, click on the live transcription button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now, I'm pleased to introduce you to Kara Metz, Associate Professor and Program Lead of the BA in Health and Human Services at the University of Arizona Global Campus, and Dr. Sarah Jarvie, Associate Professor at Colorado Christian University. They have both licensed professional counselors and have a combination of 30 years of experience. I'm going to hand it over to you now. Thanks.
Thank you, Kira. Welcome, everyone, to our session. Today, we are going to be looking at supporting students who struggle with mental illness and what we can do in the classroom to help give them support. I'm Dr. Kara Metz, and I will be sharing with Dr. Sarah Jarvie. All right, so we're just going to start off with some of the common mental illnesses. So students can come in with a variety of mental illnesses, but we are choosing to focus on the top 5 that your students will actually you will see in the classroom. These are probably the most common things that students will come to. So we're going to go over a little bit about what the symptoms are, how they might present in the classroom, what you might see students doing that have this type of disorder. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with some suggestions that you can do or things that you can do within the classroom, resources that you can give the students. So we're going to be covering depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, PTSD, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So let's get started with depression. So students who have depression will likely feel sad most of the day, almost every day. They will have a loss of interest or pleasure in anything. Their motivation is decreased. So sometimes people who have depression struggle to even get out of bed or take a shower. So it's not just feeling sad all the time, but it is almost having to force yourself to just start your day and to get moving. They might, their motor functioning might be slowed. They do things very slowly, but also their brain slows down a little bit. So it's hard to keep up with everything around them. There could be a decrease or increased appetite and also a decreased or increased need for sleep. And this isn't just, oh, I feel tired all the time, but I really just need to go to bed. I need to go to bed now. Or if I'm not sleeping, I just want to stay in bed all day. I just can't motivate myself to get out. They might feel guilt that's not appropriate. So they could feel really guilty for not turning things in. And this guilt and feeling worthless can really eat them up. And it's like a tunnel vision. And so regardless of whatever is happening on the outside, they are really struggling to find worth. They have a hard time concentrating and making decisions. They have a tough time remembering things. And this can be very frustrating because they can notice a difference between pre-depression and then a depressive period. They might have thoughts of death or suicidal ideation. So some people with depression might actually go on with attempts, but some people have these thoughts that just pop up into their head of thoughts about harming themselves or killing themselves. And these thoughts can be very, very scary for them. And so there's a high prevalence in 18 to 29-year-olds. So at UAGC, we're about the average age of 35, but still 18 to 29 this could be a lot of our students that are going through this. So what does this look like in the classroom? It could mean that students are not meeting deadlines and they're not even reaching out to you. They don't have the motivation. It's not that they don't want to reach out, but they can't figure out, they can't develop the courage or the motivation to even send that email. They might feel like, well, I should just give up. If I didn't turn this assignment in, I should just give up. That's also another reason they might not contact you, or they are fearful that you will back up their idea of being worthless. Their quality of work might be decreased. They can't find the motivation and the concentration to be able to put the effort in that they do normally. Things might be turned in late. They might not communicate with you as well. And you might see a decrease in participation in their discussion posts and emails. And this might, maybe they're, doing what is required. Their level of effort, their level of information is far lower than it has been. All right, Sarah, do you want to take anxiety?
Sure. So another common disorder that can show up in the classroom is anxiety. And some of these symptoms are listed here on the screen. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about them, but really just an excessive worry about things. And sometimes this worry is about assignments and things related to their classwork, what they're studying. And sometimes this is related to worry with other things in their life, other worries with family, friends, health issues. So just an excessive worry. Have difficulty concentrating often. Panic attacks is another anxiety symptom that sometimes pop up. And so for many students, not just students, but for many people that suffer from anxiety-induced panic attacks, that can be very debilitating and can cause them to then not want to do things that might increase those panic attacks or bring on a panic attack. And so they might kind of try to do things that they don't have to experience those things that cause the panic attacks. A decrease in sleep, wanting to sleep, needing to sleep, trying to sleep, and just feeling tired and not being able to sleep. Lots of different kind of issues with sleep, a racing mind, restlessness. Often those are related to the sleep issues where they want to try to sleep, but they just can't because their mind is going, 100 miles per hour. Irritable, muscle issues. So really this can cause impairment in all sorts of functioning, interpersonal functioning, school functioning. There can be physical issues. And really anxiety has a 9% prevalence in the United States, which is kind of fairly high. Typically more women than men present symptoms of anxiety, but that's not saying that men cannot have anxiety symptoms or be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. So what does anxiety, is that going to look like maybe from a classroom perspective, right? Because oftentimes when students struggle with most of these mental health issues, we don't know about it. We might pick up on some of these symptoms, but we don't necessarily know that they're struggling. So that often looks like struggling to finish work or even turn it in. It can sometimes be that they're writing too much. They're kind of focused on getting the assignment done, but doing too much within that assignment. And maybe going off topic and maybe more of like a tangential writing style where you're like, wait a second, this paper started out really great, really strong, and then kind of diverged here. So unnecessary worry about assignments. So maybe lots of questions, like wanting reassurance, asking for examples, just really not having the confidence in their self that is all fueled by this anxiety. But then also there can be a desire to not email you because they're worried about bothering you. So this can either look like too much and they're too anxious about this, and so they need information, or they back off from asking you to clarify things, or asking questions about an assignment because they don't want to bother you. So there's kind of two sides of anxiety.
All right, the next disorder is bipolar disorder. And so this has those symptoms of depression, but also mixes in this idea of mania or hypomania, which is what I'm going to discuss. And so we have the symptoms listed here. I want to talk about what they might actually look like. It's one thing to read the symptoms on this slide. It's another thing to experience or really talk to and intimately with someone who's experiencing something like this. And so when someone has mania, it can come out in a lot of ways. And so we hear about these highs and lows. The highs can feel really, really good, just elated. They've never felt so good. That's the good part. They tend to do activities that are risky, but maybe they have a good reward. So there's stealing, being hypersexual. All of these types of things have a payoff that they enjoy. There's a high connected to it, but at the same time can be really self-destructive. Someone who's going through mania has racing thoughts, and it is just like a rapid fire of thoughts that they can't control, which, as you know, just really makes it difficult to really get much accomplished. They have a hard time paying attention, or they're easily distracted. Again, with so many different things running through your head, you can see how the slightest thing would distract someone. They tend to be more impulsive, so they do things without thinking. And sometimes these can be good, but a lot of times these aren't the best decisions that they're making. They might have increased activity and energy, so they could spend 4 hours or less sleeping a night and then feel like they have so much energy. And with all that energy, they tend to start task after task after task, not finish things. So, you get up in the morning and you start the dishes, and then you start laundry, and then you start to vacuum the carpet, and then you realize that you only got like a third of the way through with the dishes. And so it can be really intense and really frustrating to the person because they're not able to get anything accomplished. And then finally, there's talkative and pressured speech. And so trying to keep up with their mind, they're trying to get everything out. And so this can look like very fast speech, uncontrolled speech. They just can't stop talking, but also pressured speech, like they feeling forced that they have to keep going and they have to keep talking. And so, as you can see, there are some good parts that people like about the mania, but there's also a lot of destructive things that go along with them. And it can be very, very frustrating to someone who is in a manic state. Along with that, if someone is in a manic state, it is immediately followed by a depressive state. So if you see some of these signs, you will know that you might start to then see that depression side. And this up and down can be overwhelming for a person. So what might this look like in a classroom? Because they're not sleeping, you might get late night emails, and maybe lots of emails if you don't respond right away. Papers might be disjointed, where someone, again, they might go on a tangent. Their mind is racing so bad that they just can't keep a continuous thought. They might even hyper-focus on a few areas. Assignments will be turned in late or half finished. We talked about that increased goal-directed activity. So maybe they start the paper, 3 days in advance, and then they get carried away with other things. Then they just turn in the assignment that they had done a few days ago, and it's not completely there. They also might have irritability in emails. Another symptom that I didn't discuss is anger, and that comes a lot with hypomania, where people are just feeling irritable all the time and are really having a hard time connecting with the world. And this could be because of the increased thoughts in their head. They have decreased patience for what's going on. But a lot of the manic symptoms can also create some irritability and anger in a person or a student.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I was muted. Sorry. The next disorder we want to talk about is post-traumatic stress disorder, or most commonly referred to as PTSD. And so, there's kind of a wide range of why someone would be experiencing PTSD. And really, it boils down to some sort of experience of trauma. So either witnessing trauma, experiencing trauma, and sometimes PTSD doesn't show up right away. It can come on a little bit later after the fact for the trauma. But what are some behaviors that might show up as PTSD symptoms? So there's sometimes irritability, angry, aggressive behavior, being frightened and startled easily, sometimes being frightened and startled by certain scenes or sights or even smells connected to whatever their trauma was, sometimes guilt or shame and anxiety, trouble concentrating, hypervigilance, being on guard, sometimes feelings of loneliness can come on and be triggered by someone's PTSD, trouble sleeping, or having nightmares where they are reliving some aspect of that trauma experience. And so they're not able to sleep very well, which then is also you can have flashbacks where they keep reliving the trauma event. And so these are all things that might hinder them from really being able to feel like they're being present as a student, because they're having all of these things happening in their mind. Uncontrolled thoughts, sometimes thoughts related to the trauma events, negative thoughts, a hopelessness can come on. So sometimes a little bit more of depression related symptoms are related to their PTSD. Sometimes memory problems, so trouble remembering things, maybe deadlines. And so obviously this is just kind of a brief glimpse at PTSD symptoms. There's a lot more, but these are some of like the main common symptoms that as a PTSD diagnosis. So what does PTSD look like in a classroom? Some of the same things as depression and anxiety. So again, problems paying attention, maybe struggling to accept either criticism or feedback or even praise. So you get that, you give them feedback on an assignment and it doesn't really go over so well. They might really be struggling to participate in the class, whether through a discussion board, maybe struggling with even thinking through a paper or problem solving, maybe detaching from the class or from their peers. Maybe they started, with a certain group of peers and then they've kind of fallen behind. And sometimes overly sensitive to things such as noises or places or smells that could remind them of the trauma or bring up memories related to that trauma. Sometimes those are avoided either consciously or subconsciously. So, right, if we're talking about someone that's experienced trauma as a child, like significant childhood trauma, they might not even realize that they're avoiding places that are related to that trauma, which might be different than someone who, say, has served in the military and has witnessed war, like war combat trauma. That's going to look different or present a little bit differently in terms of what noises are that they might be sensitive to or might trigger some symptoms for them. Then.
All right, so finally the last disorder, and I'm going to go through quickly because we're running out of time and we have all kinds of great solutions. ADHD, this is probably what most people are familiar with. There are two sides to ADHD. Sometimes we call it ADD, which is still ADHD, but it's just the inattentive side. So people are disorganized, they have a hard time keeping their attention, trouble staying on topic, they forget things, they're easily distracted, they might struggle to get along with others, and you might not hear someone because they are in their own thoughts. This is a harder one to recognize, but maybe not so much in an online classroom. But then you have the hyperactivity where people are impulsive. They have a hard time waiting to their turn to speak. They fidget along a lot. They can't sit still for a long time, struggles with quiet activities. They have excessive talking. You can see in these disorders, there are a lot of overlaps with some of the symptoms. And so if you ever do live classrooms, this might look like someone who needs to stand up and not sit the whole time, take a walk around or do something at the same time. It's not as though they are not paying attention, but they need to do these other things in order to pay attention. Their work might not be proofread because they're hurrying along, they get distracted, they just want to get it done. Not that they don't want to do it well, but their brain just doesn't allow that. They might not follow the instructions fully because they can't concentrate long enough to read the full instructions. They turn in work late or half finished, again, just like bipolar disorder with the hypomania and the mania. They get distracted, they turn things in late, they lose track of time. They might need more time to get through the work. They might need an extension to their deadlines. I know sometimes people have a 3-day extension, but sometimes we have to work with students even more than that. And then some sections might be more thorough than others because they're hyper concentrating on something. So they write a lot about something they're really interested in, and everything else, they might write a sentence or two. All right. Sarah?
Yeah, so next we're going to just go through a little bit of like, what can we do about this, right? So the first thing is practicing empathy. And what we mean by empathy is really in being aware of, giving some compassion to that student and being aware of like, how does this make me feel, as not to project our own feelings onto the students, and being able to, reflect on how we can help the student, but give them some boundaries and some guidelines, being aware of things that may be triggering for us. Maybe we've struggled with some of these things in our past, and helping students break up maybe some of the work or reading or videos into smaller chunks that seem a little bit more tangible. So maybe, I know often, especially with adult students that are working full-time, going to school full-time and having families, many of them tend to do everything in one day for assignments. So maybe helping them break that up a little bit. Reach out to them, communicate to them, and tell them, you're open for meetings, accepting late work, and helping them get back on track, maybe amending late policies, and just kind of reaching out and letting students know that you're there and you're an advocate and help for them. So, I'm not going to go through all of these because we're quickly running out of time, but believing that we can show our students kind of a unconditional positive regard. This is some counseling language here, but and be just an advocate for them and helping teach them to advocate for themselves, because oftentimes we don't know that they're struggling unless they let us know. We can reach out to them and be like, hey, I've noticed you've been missing some assignments, or maybe some assignments aren't complete. What can I do to help you? What are some things that I can help get you back on track? So other things that you can do is helping them set a schedule, encouraging them to take breaks, and trying to follow kind of a timeline for themselves, seeking support, whether that be another classmate, whether that be family members, and really, just helping them realize that they can advocate for themselves and use you as a resource. And taking care of oneself as a student is important, and it's also important as faculty, as we can support our students through this. So that was just kind of a way run through quickly of our last few things. So what questions do we have about this, and how you can maybe even counter some students that you might think are struggling with some mental health issues, or what, through the information that we presented, any questions?
Any questions? Well, this is the time for Q&A. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think this is such an important discussion, and this really sparked my interest when I had a student who had really severe anxiety and panic and once we started talking on the phone, she talked about how none of her instructors ever, and they didn't understand how the anxiety really. So we just talked, and that seemed. Questions?
I recently had a student that was struggling to turn things in, and missed probably 2 weeks worth of assignments turning in, and I had emailed her reaching out, and she finally disclosed to me that she was really struggling with depression, and so she was really having a hard time completing her assignments, and so I helped work out a plan with her to help her figure out how she could complete some assignments. Now, unfortunately, she did end up dropping the class. She felt like it was just too overwhelming to try to maintain the pace that the class was moving at. And so she ended up needing to take a break. But I think sometimes, it's up to us to help students think those things through, and we can help encourage them to maybe they do need to take a break. Maybe their mental health is really struggling, and they need to, seek some outside resources, and maybe school shouldn't be their main priority right now. I think we all have complicated lives. And so I think sometimes as faculty, it's nice to help students in that way too. Like, right, yes, we want the best for them and we want them to succeed in our classes, but sometimes our vision for success might not be what the student ultimately needs. So just, keep that in mind for the future. Just that, if there are some students that are doing really well at first and then kind of start to struggle, or vice versa, then they're really struggling and then they start doing well, maybe there's some other mental health issues out there, and just, being cognizant of, those factors that are often not disclosed up front. So thank you so much for everyone's time today. I hope this was a great learning experience for you, or maybe gets you thinking about a student or students that you can help throughout this term or in your future. So appreciate your presence today.
All right, with that, we will wrap it up. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I think it was so packed full of great information, and I just appreciate everything you shared today. So everyone, enjoy the rest of your TLC, and thank you for attending. Bye.